She said she was on a pilgrimage with her mother, just another tourist among the thousands who come to Israel each year seeking meaning, forgiveness, or faith. The streets of Jerusalem shimmered beneath the late afternoon sun, where gold light spilled over stone walls that had seen centuries of devotion. The air was heavy with incense and the murmurs of prayer. Vendors called out softly in Hebrew and Arabic, their voices blending with the rustle of pilgrims moving through the narrow alleys of the old city. Amid this timeless stillness, she turned her head, and saw him. A man passing through the crowd, head down, wearing sunglasses, unaware of her gaze. For a heartbeat, their paths crossed and then drifted apart. No words, no recognition, just a flicker of familiarity, gone as quickly as it appeared. At the time, it meant nothing. Just a stranger in a sacred place. But months later, that same moment would be replayed millions of times online, slowed down, zoomed in, and analyzed frame by frame. Some called it fate. Others called it a setup. What once seemed like a simple coincidence would become the seed of a storm, a digital legend that questioned everything from love and loyalty to the very nature of truth. Online, the theories spread like wildfire, one post igniting another, until the entire internet seemed to be vibrating with speculation. Screens lit up across time zones, each one a new battleground for truth and fiction. On TikTok, edited clips of Erika's interviews looped endlessly, slowed down to catch the shimmer of a tear. On X, hashtags trended by the hour, hashtag Erika Kirk, hashtag Israeli honeypot, hashtag who was she really? YouTubers uploaded exposés, layering conspiracy over commentary, while podcasts dissected every frame of her past appearances. They called it the Erika Kirk Israeli honeypot theory. Some claimed her tears were scripted, her pain rehearsed for sympathy. Others said the real betrayal came from inside the family, that Charlie's own sister had leaked private text messages showing a man in crisis, realizing too late that he never truly knew the woman beside him. And as each claim spread, so did the paranoia. Every click, every retweet, added another layer of distortion, until the story was no longer about affection or tragedy, it had become something else entirely. The language of love was replaced by the language of control. Beyond the offices, the charity work, and the businesses, there was a larger orbit, one that connected Erika Kirk, her family, and even Charlie Kirk, to circles of wealth, politics, and influence. Erika had briefly worked on Donald Trump's campaign while participating in beauty pageants, a curious intersection of public visibility and political proximity. Charlie's father, Robert Kirk, had helped design Trump Tower in Chicago, a landmark both literal and symbolic of power. Separate lives, separate industries, yet orbiting the same gravitational field. It was a universe of influence where technology, philanthropy, and politics overlapped, and where the smallest movement could ripple outward. Observers noted the coincidences, connections, and alignments, questioning whether any of it was accidental. Every introduction, every meeting, every seemingly minor career decision appeared as though part of a larger design. For theorists online, the love story between Charlie and Erika was just one node in this complex network. Public appearances, charitable work, social campaigns, each could be interpreted as strategy, each as preparation for influence. Whether Erika and Charlie were aware of it or not, their lives had intersected in ways that suggested forces beyond ordinary comprehension were at play. And in that orbit, the line between choice and orchestration blurred. In the end, no one knows what is entirely true. Was it love, messy, human, and tragic, or was it something orchestrated, calculated, and deliberate? The encounter in Jerusalem, the New York diner, the rise within Turning Point USA, the charitable work, and the family's connections all converge into a narrative that is at once intimate and immense. Online, every frame, every text message, and every public statement has been analyzed and reanalyzed, each observer deciding what they believe. Some see fate, some see manipulation. Some see ambition, others, strategy. The storm that began with a fleeting glance in a crowded airport grew into a global discourse about influence, control, and the hidden patterns behind public lives. And so the question lingers, echoing through screens, forums, and whispered conversations. Was it destiny, or was it design? Was the story of Charlie and Erika Kirk simply a romance, or was it a narrative written long before either of them realized it? As the debate continues, the truth remains elusive, leaving only the shadows of speculation, a network of power and coincidence, forever intertwined, and forever unresolved. Every pause, every decision, every charity initiative, every board meeting, when stitched together, it painted a picture that was hard to ignore. Whether reality or theory, the network of power surrounding Erika Kirk suggested a world where influence, visibility, and strategy overlapped in ways most of us would never notice, until we were looking. The deeper you looked, the more tangled the threads became. Erika's life and work were not isolated chapters, they appeared as parts of a larger network, stretching across philanthropy, defense, and influence. AZ Tech International, GTK Industries, Romanian Angels, each entity alone seemed straightforward, even respectable. But viewed together, patterns began to emerge, like lines connecting dots that were never meant to be linked. AZ Tech International, founded by her mother Lori, was involved in strategic technology and defense contracts. GTK Industries specialized in data security, risk analysis, and projects for the Department of Defense and Homeland Security. On paper, they were legitimate businesses, but the timing and consistency of their projects drew scrutiny. Observers noticed how these enterprises operated near key military and government hubs, intersecting with areas of high security interest. To some, it was an uncanny alignment of business, influence, and opportunity. Then there was Romanian Angels. On the surface, a charitable organization delivering gifts and aid to orphans. But its headquarters near a military base in Eastern Europe raised questions. Lori's removal from public-facing charity materials, coupled with the lack of transparent operations, only fueled speculation. Could the organization serve a dual purpose, one public and benevolent, the other hidden and strategic? For theorists online, it was evidence that Erika's trajectory was guided by more than personal ambition. Layered over this was Erika's personal rise. From a casual encounter in Israel to a high-profile relationship with Charlie Kirk, her involvement in Turning Point USA, and her eventual ascension to CEO, each move could be viewed as strategic, deliberate, and potentially orchestrated. Critics argue it was as if her public persona of charm, leadership, and philanthropy served as camouflage, hiding connections and influence from public scrutiny. Even the smallest details were dissected. Her brief work on Donald Trump's campaign while participating in beauty pageants. Charlie Kirk's father helping design Trump Tower in Chicago. Separate paths, yet orbiting the same spheres of influence, wealth, and political power. Coincidence or pattern? That question haunted observers and analysts alike. Throughout the internet, forums, and discussion threads, this web of connections grew into something that felt almost architectural, each link deliberate, each move calculated. The narrative of chance encounters, personal ambition, and love seemed intertwined with a larger story, one where philanthropy, technology, and political influence converged. And for those watching closely, the chilling possibility emerged. The events unfolding weren't merely about a relationship or a company, they were about control, preparation, and the subtle orchestration of power. As the story grew online, digital investigators and curious researchers began tracing Erika's family background, uncovering a web of connections that raised more questions than answers. Her mother, Lori, was linked to defense and security contracting, her father, Kent, involved in technology research and program management with ties to strategic security projects. Public records revealed companies like AZ Tech International and GTK Industries, firms operating in areas intersecting with the Department of Defense and Homeland Security. Individually, these details could be coincidence. Together, they suggested a lineage steeped in influence, networks, and access to power. Commentators on social media pieced together timelines, contracts, and professional overlaps, painting a picture that hinted at meticulous planning. Was Erika simply the daughter of ambitious professionals, or was her path guided by forces beyond the public eye? The more the pieces were examined, the more the public began to question the romance narrative. A casual dinner meeting, a chance encounter in Israel, and a swift rise within Turning Point USA, all of it seemed to follow a pattern that some viewers interpreted as deliberate. Each revelation, each new connection, made the story less about love and more about design. Then came Romanian Angels, Erika's humanitarian project. On the surface, it appeared innocent, a charity delivering gifts to orphans in Romania, partnered with the US military to provide aid and comfort. Promotional videos showed smiling children, wrapped presents, and volunteers working tirelessly. Yet, investigators and online researchers noticed peculiarities. The organization's headquarters was located near a US military base in Eastern Europe, a region previously highlighted in reports about orphanage management controversies and disappearances, though no direct evidence linked Romanian Angels to those claims. Further scrutiny revealed more inconsistencies. Lori, Erika's mother, once prominently featured in charity materials, had removed her public presence from all online references. Names, roles, and affiliations that were once transparent became opaque. To some, the charity's angelic image seemed less about altruism and more about strategy, a public-facing layer concealing connections to defense, intelligence, and influence networks. For online theorists, Romanian Angels was not an isolated project, but a piece of a larger puzzle. When connected with AZ Tech, GTK Industries, and Erika's personal trajectory, the charity appeared as part of an intricate web blending philanthropy, technology, and power. The sweetness of the mission could no longer be separated from the shadows behind it. Outside the office walls, the story was even more complex. Former insiders began speaking out, cautiously, about forces beyond the building, donors, sponsors, and political allies who exerted influence over every decision. They described Charlie as a man under immense pressure, caught between transparency and control, trying to steer Turning Point USA back to its stated mission. Erika, they said, appeared to be operating on a different wavelength entirely, attending donor meetings, reviewing strategic initiatives, and quietly reporting to parties unknown. What outsiders called ambition, insiders called coordination. Every event, every public statement, seemed carefully measured. Former staffers said Erika didn't just step into power, she tested the environment, probing reactions, adjusting her approach. Some directives appeared minor, almost trivial, but they subtly shifted the organization's inner dynamics. Employees whispered about decisions made without explanation, contracts signed, projects reassigned, meetings rescheduled, all while Charlie tried to maintain his authority. It was a story of duality, one of love, friendship, and leadership visible to the world, another of calculated influence, quietly shaping the outcome from behind the scenes. For those who watched closely, it became clear that the real power was no longer just in the office, it had moved to the hidden corridors of connections and loyalty. By the time Charlie's death occurred, the gears had already been turning, and the transition was nearly complete. Their story, as told to the public, began like a movie scene, at a small diner in New York City, in 2018. Erika arrived expecting a business interview. What followed was 3 hours of intense conversation, a grilling on politics, philosophy, and economics, each question probing her knowledge, her worldview, her instincts. By the end, Charlie reportedly said he wouldn't hire her. Yet, in the same breath, he asked her out. A chance meeting turned into a relationship, and eventually, into marriage. To the world, it was spontaneous, charming, almost cinematic. But for those following the theory, the timing felt almost too precise. Erika later recalled glimpsing Charlie months before, in Tel Aviv, during a pilgrimage with her mother, and feeling a sense of familiarity she couldn't explain. Days later, a mutual friend introduced them in New York. The story of destiny, coincidence, and a spark at the right moment now carried a subtle unease. Was this romance merely the beginning of a carefully orchestrated path? Even in that first meeting, what appeared casual to outsiders may have been deliberate. Every laugh, every question, every handshake could have been part of a script no one else knew existed. To some, the scene was not just the start of a love story, it was the first act in a narrative that would soon unravel the private and public lives of two influential figures. Then came the announcement, days after Charlie's death, that Erika Kirk was now the new CEO of Turning Point USA. For those still inside, the news didn't shock them. It simply confirmed what they had already feared, that the transition hadn't begun after his death, it had begun long before. The leaked texts painted the portrait of a marriage slowly unraveling, not in arguments or scandals, but in small silences that grew into walls. "I don't even feel like I know her anymore," Charlie reportedly wrote to his sister, the words glowing on a dim phone screen that would later circulate through millions of others. To the public, they were a couple defined by shared faith and purpose. But behind closed doors, insiders described something very different. Erika, they said, had begun to move differently, with a new confidence, or perhaps something colder. She started making major decisions at Turning Point USA without Charlie's approval, cutting meetings short, overriding communications, even signing off on policy memos herself. At first, some dismissed it as ambition, a driven woman stepping into leadership. But soon, a pattern began to take shape. Event rosters shifted overnight, familiar staff names disappeared, and social media posts were edited without explanation. Employees whispered about new people showing up at conferences, faces no one could identify, always observing, rarely speaking. Cameras followed Erika at every public event, but it was what couldn't be seen that unsettled people most. "It felt like we were being watched," one former staffer said. Not just by her, but by something around her. What started as curiosity had become quiet fear, the sense that the real story wasn't unfolding in the headlines, but somewhere just out of sight, inside the Turning Point USA headquarters. The mood had shifted, subtly at first, then unmistakably. Meetings that once felt open and energetic grew quiet. Longtime staff avoided eye contact in hallways. Laughter faded from the break rooms. "You could feel something in the air," said one former employee. It wasn't anger. It was fear, like we were being tested. They called it the whisper network, the unspoken current that moved through the building when no one dared to speak out loud. People said Erika had changed. Her tone was sharper, her presence heavier. She began arriving with a small team no one recognized, silent assistants who rarely spoke, always taking notes. When she walked into a room, conversations stopped mid-sentence. She no longer asked for Charlie's input, she gave directives. She scheduled her own private meetings with donors and consultants, closing doors that had once stayed open. To those inside, it didn't feel like a takeover, not exactly. It felt like a rehearsal. As if someone was quietly preparing her for a role she hadn't yet been given. Even the rhythm of the office changed. Familiar voices were replaced by unfamiliar ones. Staff names vanished from directories. And through it all, Erika seemed calm, almost rehearsed, smiling just enough to appear normal, never enough to invite questions.